August the 7th, 1998. 2 bombs go off simultaneously at the US Embassies in Nairobi, Kenya and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 224 people are killed, thousands more injured. Cape Town, a little over a year later. Khalfan Khamis Mohammed, or KKM as he is known to the American FBI, is arrested at Home Affairs. He is trying to renew his permit for political asylum. This arrest is the climax of an international FBI operation, so intriguing that it resembles the plot of a Tarantino movie. But who is Khalfan Khamis Mohammed? This is the story of one man's journey, from the idyllic setting of rural Zanzibar to life imprisonment in a high-security penitentiary in New York City. It highlights a vital question that has affected all of our lives in the shadow of the September 11 attacks on America. What is it that turns young boys into bombers? Khalfan was born in Pemba, one of the 2 islands that make up Zanzibar. The youngest boy in a large and poor family, Khalfan has a twin sister, Fatuma.
I had a lot of complications when giving birth to Khalfan. His twin, Fatuma, was born first at night. Khalfan was not born until the following morning. It was raining that day. We lived deep in the rural areas, so my younger sister had to telephone for help to take me to the hospital. Khalfan was just an ordinary child who went to school. After school, he performed the normal domestic chores and liked playing football like all youth. He didn't indulge in any antisocial behavior.
Zanzibar is an archipelago of 2 small islands just off the east coast of Tanzania. Swirling around these islands is a unique combination of trade winds and current that brings in a great diversity of fish. More important than the fish, these trade winds also once brought in waves of colonial powers. This placed the island at the crossroads of history, subject to and shaped by the competing demands of imperial powers. These days, the country is torn between the rival forces of Islamic fundamentalism and United States interventionism. But in 1973, when Khalfan was born, the dominant power in this part of the world was the Soviet Union. When Khalfan was still small, the family moved to Kidimni village. Here he attended school and took part in everyday Muslim activities. People say he was smart at school, like his sister, Zahura. In looks, he closely resembles his brother, Robert. In 1990, there were heavy financial strains on the family. Khalfan was forced to leave school. He moved to Dar es Salaam, where he started working at this shop in downtown Moshi Street.
Khalfan was a very religious person. He didn't have too many friends. In fact, most of his friends were fellow worshippers. He spent a lot of time inside the house. I was surprised when I heard that he was involved, because I didn't expect him to be involved with killing people. We were really surprised. Frankly, I feel disappointed. He isn't as good a person as I thought he was, if he really took part in such a thing.
During this time, Khalfan lived with his brother and sister-in-law. They stayed in this room. He stayed in this tiny room behind the shop. His sister-in-law, Rahma, now stays in a bigger house with her 3 children. Her husband is away in London, working to support them. Like many boys of his age, her youngest is known as Osama.
I first heard about the bomb attack over the radio while I was cooking in the kitchen. When it happened, I thought this is the beginning of a war. I wondered, why is it that of all the countries of the world, it's only America that's frequently attacked? I lived in the same house with Khalfan, so I knew him well. He was not quarrelsome, he was a law-abiding person. I don't believe he was involved in the bombings, because he didn't have the wherewithal to do such a thing. Khalfan only attended school until standard 9. I love Khalfan like my elder brother. He was always here for me. Khalfan has a good rapport with people. He made visitors feel at home. Our visitors had a good impression of him.
During this time, Khalfan spent a lot of time at the mosque. It was here that he was radicalized and learned about the oppression of Muslims in many parts of the world. Here too, he was spotted by some of the men who would later play a role in the bombing of the US Embassy. By 1984, he had begun to despair at his own life. Fired by idealism about Islam, he paid his own way to Afghanistan with money he earned at his brother's grocery store. There, he received jihad training in Osama bin Laden's camps. His goal was to be a soldier for Allah, fighting against those he felt were attacking Muslims. He trained for 10 months. Then, when others were selected for missions or additional training, Khalfan was sent home. He was informed he could not yet go and fight for his Muslim brothers and sisters, and was told to leave a telephone number where he could be contacted. Extremely disappointed, he returned to Dar es Salaam, to a lowly job in this cafe. Here he waited for the phone to ring.
Being also a person who has been a friend in Afghanistan, he was one of them. So he could receive orders just like others from their bosses.
Finally, 4 years later, he did receive his orders. Khalfan's job was to facilitate operations for the rest of the team. He also helped build the bomb and later loaded it into the truck. He wasn't expected to drive it to the target. That, the suicide bomber did alone.
As I was facing the window, all of a sudden, for about a split second, I saw something like lightning. It was a split second, and then all of a sudden, boom. I still wasn't sure actually what it was, because I was expecting outside the embassy also to be chaos. But when I peeked over the walls, I saw hundreds of people looking at the embassy. So I knew then that outside things are okay. The problem is just here in the embassy. For me, I would have thought the American embassy would be the safest place on earth. But now I've come to discover that there are no safe places on this earth. Sincerely speaking, there are no safe places.
During the Cold War, Tanzania was much closer to the Soviet Union than to America, but the embassy bombing changed all that. Much like their US counterparts, many Tanzanians felt personally threatened by growing Islamic militancy. In the embassy bombing, all of those killed had been Tanzanians. Because of this, the police were only too happy to get all the help they could.
There was no question of who is using who. We were all hit, therefore we had to work together.
In this new climate, Madeleine Albright, the then US Secretary of State, visited the destroyed embassy.
the interpretation that was put by Albright was very much correct. That was not religion, that wasn't politics, it was just a crime, murder, pure and simple.
At the time, the cooperation between the Tanzanians and the Americans produced some tangible results. The once run-down police officers were equipped with computers and air conditioning. When the FBI moved into the building, they brought with them a shiny new lift. And in future, all Tanzanian police detectives would be sent to the US for training.
Hardships and poverty have driven some Tanzanians to be submissive to the Americans. They are paid to serve them and only a handful benefit.
Yes, that's right. That cooperation just serves narrow interests. Exactly.
America is only saying his own interest. He will just fight for his own interest always. Like all the Israeli who said we have no permanent friendship and no permanent enemy. We have only permanent interest.
In the aftermath of the bombing, these interests coincided with those of the Tanzanians. It was a collaboration that was to prove highly successful. The local CID worked closely with the FBI and soon made a breakthrough in the investigation. They managed to identify the chassis number of one of the cars used by the bombers. Through meticulous forensics, they traced the vehicle back to a dealer. He had sold it to Khalfan. Unlike the other bombers, Khalfan had naively used his real name, not only to buy the car, but also to hire this house, which is where the trail finally led. It was here that the cell members lived while building the bombs. They had chosen it especially because the high walls made it more private.
This is the sitting room. It was found after they've left with only rugs, a carpet, and curtains, red curtains, in Arabic style. It seems that they were not using chairs or lounging. The bomb was actually manufactured in the sitting room.
The current landlord was afraid to be identified, but he did describe what happened the day the FBI came.
Yeah, the way it happened, it was just like in the movies. They painted the house with a black substance. He's not sure whether it is it's a painty or it's a charcoal dusty or something like that. But they ran through over the walls and all the walls. This machine, which was producing some negatives, and amazingly, these negatives were coming out with shadows of people, not actual pictures of people, but with shadows of those guys who were staying.
Several days before the bombing, the other members of the cell left the country. Khalfan stayed behind. He was given a mere $1,000. His job was to remain with the suicide bomber until he set off on his mission. Then, before leaving himself, Khalfan was supposed to clean the house and get rid of any incriminating evidence. During the police investigation, the FBI found a grinder at Khalfan's sister's house. It was the one that had been used to crush TNT for the bomb. Instead of disposing of it, as he was told to do, Khalfan had given it to his sister, with careful instructions that it was to be thoroughly cleaned before she used it. To him, there was no point letting a good grinder go to waste. Deeply distrustful of America, Rubeya remained skeptical of how involved his brother really was. He insists that even if he was involved, it was because of his commitment to Islam.
In my opinion, if Khalfan really was involved in these bombings, it was because he was convinced that his fellow Muslims were under attack. He identified with these oppressed people and then joined up with others who share similar views, and together they did these things.
This deep distrust of America is not surprising. Once the FBI had established Khalfan's involvement in the bombing, members of his family were repeatedly arrested and interrogated.
I was under constant FBI surveillance. They constantly invade my privacy and claim to be carrying out searches. Our unhappiness is made worse by the frequent arrest of different family members who are taken into detention but never even charged in a court of law. We have no peace.
Frankly, when I heard of the bombings over the radio, I didn't think Khalfan could have anything to do with it. But after a week, things changed. That's when Rabia was arrested and taken away from his family. His wife, my daughter-in-law over here, came to report to me about Rabia's arrest while I was cultivating my land. I stopped digging and sat down while she explained the whole incident to me. It's still unclear to me why he was arrested.
I wasn't afraid, but what I objected to was the manner in which they interrogated me.
The day after the bombing, Khalfan took the $1,000 he'd been given and boarded a bus for Cape Town. Here he checked into a hotel for a few days. The name he'd given himself on his new passport was Nasser. Using this name, he soon found a job as a chef at a fast food restaurant in Athlone on the Cape Flats.
I just opened Burger World, and because I had an Indian chef, a Pakistani chef, I thought I'll add to the flavor and get a Tanzanian as well. And then I interviewed him and I asked him to start the next day. And then 9 months later, I asked him to move in with us.
This restaurant has since closed down. Today, Abin Dalvi runs a sweet factory nearby.
There was nothing funny for some people coming in there that don't look right. There was nothing, absolutely nothing like that to say, that is connected to any particular group or parties, whatever. Nothing like
Everything about him was religion. He would walk home from work, and as soon as he gets home, he'll have his bath and he will start praying.
This is the mosque that Khalfan frequented. It's directly across the road from their house.
Well, yes, he was one of our congregants at the mosque here. And the mosque in Islam is such that people frequent it 5 times a day, but more especially on a Friday. And on those days he would be here very regularly. And he would compliment me on my little talks, especially those that had got to do with lifting up the downtrodden, lifting up the poor, helping them. And that he was very devout. Even in his daily prayers, he would go beyond the call of duty in his worship of Allah, God. At night, it's a voluntary prayer. But he would get up at night and he would supplicate and invoke Allah and he would pray. And to us, in fact to any Muslim, that is a mark of a committed, sincere believer.
It was pure luck that the FBI managed to trace Khalfan to Cape Town. An agent was going through files at Home Affairs when he spotted Khalfan's photograph in a pile of asylum applications. They set a trap. Unsuspecting, Khalfan returned to Home Affairs. The FBI and their South African colleagues were waiting. On the day Khalfan was arrested, Abin got a call telling him to hurry home.
And when I got here, I found like 10, 12 of Home Affairs people all in black clothing. And they came in and said, look, we're in connection with Nasser. We would like to have a look at his room. I personally think it was like movies, everybody around. What's happening, a guy with a camera taking photos. And I found it very strange. Why so many people? This is where Nasser stayed. So that same day, it was splashed in the papers.
I think it must be his passport photo. It's a black and white photo that was enlarged, yeah? And that was splashed on the front page of the Argus. And when I saw this picture, I said, no, but this is not him. And you try to cover the face and the beard and everything, you know, so you check the eye part and that you see to make sure that this is him. And then I still thought in the back of my mind that, you know, if he appears in everything, you know, everything they're saying about him is not true, and, you know, we'll get to see him again. But of course it didn't happen that way.
Khalfan was arrested by South African officials for being in the country illegally. He was then handed over to the FBI. For several weeks, a plane with an accompanying doctor had been on standby at Cape Town International Airport. Khalfan's arrest and subsequent extradition to the US plunged South Africa into a controversy. Our constitution makes it illegal to transfer someone to a country where he may face the death penalty, unless there is an assurance that he won't be executed. The Americans were well aware of this, but in their determination to crack down on international terrorism, they ran roughshod over South Africa's supreme law. Khalfan had been arrested for being in the country illegally. It was a perfect excuse. The extradition was disguised as a deportation, and he was quickly flown to America.
The handing over of Mohammed to the United States government agents was accordingly unlawful.
This was the finding of the Constitutional Court, where the case finally landed up. It was too late for Khalfan, but it has set a precedent for the future.
Enshrined in the Constitution. It is therefore important that the state lead by example.
Now, that kind of values, where you can just walk over another country's sovereignty, cannot be permitted. And this judgment, in fact, says that. It says that you can't come and impress your laws and your ways of doing things on South Africa. You don't just come and take people out of the country.
Why did the South African government hurriedly hand Khalfan over to the Americans? Why? When South Africa has the right and power to hold him in custody. The South African government has demonstrated that they are subservient to the powerful nations.
Unlike South Africa, Tanzania is largely a Muslim country, with religious violence on the increase. The FBI's style of operating may have resulted in the arrest of those involved in the grim events of 1998, but it's questionable whether it'll prevent boys like Khalfan from becoming bombers in the future.
The problem is people, especially the regime in America, they are giving easy answers to difficult questions. And they are trying to do away with some of the questions. They don't want to know why they have been attacked. They are only interested in who attacked us. Let me tell you this. If I would stand against America for what it's doing, destroying Islam, I'll do it.
Sometimes symptoms are there, and everybody can see, but not until people are killed.
Soon after September the 11th, Khalfan's court case came to an end at the federal courthouse in New York City, in the shadow of what was once the World Trade Center. He was sentenced to life in prison. Some of the jurors said they didn't want to make him a martyr by imposing the death sentence. Back in Zanzibar, his mother has just received a letter from Khalfan.
My lovely mother, I thank and I'm very grateful for your advice that you told me to be very polite when I'm in jail here. And I promise you that I will be following your advice all the time. I'm asking you forgiveness. I'm asking you forgiveness for any mistakes that you might see it that I did wrong on you. And my goal is to build and not to break.
In a tropical paradise like Zanzibar, the palm trees normally grow toward the light. But sometimes, because of an accident or an injury, the tree twists and grows away from the sun. Perhaps Khalfan is a little like that.
Every person has their own conviction, but I would never be able to do something like that. I don't have the material means or the knowledge. Besides, killing people is something I cannot think about, let alone do.